Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this morning. But about a year ago, my husband and I, Richard, we were kindly invited by Diane Sear to host a program for the Biddeford Cultural and Heritage Center. And we thought that this walking tour program would be perfect for a beautiful summer day in Biddeford. And today's beautiful weather certainly seems to agree with us. Thank you for joining us to learn and remember how this spectacular University of New England was, in its origin, a religious boarding school for Franco-American boys, a college seraphique, and then St. Francis High School and St. Francis College, and that became co-ed. We are here to honor the founders, the DeCary brothers who were from Montreal, who came to Biddeford to provide spiritual leadership to French Canadians and Franco-Americans. I became interested in these two gentlemen because my mother-in-law, Rose Ann Morin LaRue, knew them because she attended St. Andre's Catholic Church when she and her family lived in Biddeford. We will also learn about the very highly educated Franciscan priests who the DeCarys recruited to Biddeford for the purpose of creating an academic environment where students were intellectually and spiritually enriched. As my husband and I prepared for this program, we were welcomed by the wonderful administration here at the University of New England and President Herbert. And thank you, President James Herbert, for the honor of attending this walk down memory lane. And we are grateful for this rare opportunity because this program will be retained by digital recording for our archival purposes. So I will go through the program following Mayor Cassavant's welcoming. The Honorable Alan Cassavant, the Mayor of Biddeford. We are so honored to have you here today. He is a Franco-American who, while he was in the legislature, he was a member of the Franco-American Caucus. And that is a caucus that is a bipartisan group of legislators who plan the annual Franco-American Hall of Fame. Senator Susan DeChambeau is here today, as she was one of our co-ed students at this St. Francis College, and she is now a leader in that caucus. And so we are so honored to have so many alumni here, and she invited several, and thank you for that. So we are honored today to have Mayor Cassavant and his wife Patty, and we thank him for opening this program. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Being mayor is really, really a cool job. This is one of the benefits of doing that. There's another little side benefit. It's the only place that I know that I'm called honorable. So that's a big, big perk. So I want to welcome you all today, and especially in this particular room, to honor the founding of UNE St. Francis. And of course, the DeCary brothers, who through their piety and their generosity laid the foundation of this school. And this school, of course, is really central to Biddeford. It's been iconic for many years and a special place for not just the students, but for the people of Biddeford as well. It's also important to note that Dr. Norman Beaupre is here. Dr. Beaupre is a good friend of mine, and it's been a good friend of mine for many, many years. And we want to thank you for all that you've done in the preservation of the Franco history and the preservation or establishment of the Heritage Plaza and things of that nature. Your works and books, I think, are pivotal in terms of rediscovering our ethnicity, so thank you, Mr. Beaupre. And aside from everyone else here, I want to recognize Speaker of the House, Ryan Fecteau, who's from Biddeford and very proud of his Franco ethnicity as well. Sometimes we forget our ethnicity, and my job today is essentially to talk about what the DeCary brothers, the climate, and what they tried to do when they came here and they settled here. I also want to thank my wife, Patty, for being here. She's from Fort Kent, which is another Franco-cultural center. And of course, my friend James, his wife Lynn, who I saw somewhere. There she is. James and Lynn have been so welcoming in terms of me coming to this university and for the people in general, and I have to give credit because since his tenure, he has really carried on the legacy of the DeCary brothers by urging his students to be part of the community, going out there and doing public service. So that to understand the DeCarys, the thing is understand Biddeford and the Franco population. So you have to recognize that the 15,000 Francos that came here came for one particular reason, the mills, to work there, to get a standard livable wage. Maybe livable is not the right word, but to earn a consistent living. They came also to maintain their heritage, their language, their culture, and their faith. And so when they came, they set themselves up in little Canadas in Biddeford, around the Water Street area, around St. Andre's Church, and they're there to preserve those things, to help each other out. And the city responded, in fact, by building tenement buildings to house them. It's interesting to note, and again, this is important to understand sometimes the history of communities. In Saco, the city fathers actually forbade the construction of tenements to keep the Francos out. And so when you drive through Saco, you notice there aren't too many tenements. And that was on purpose. And that's not the first time, of course, that we're going to see elements of hostility and discrimination against the Francos. Because the culture when they first came here was Protestant and it was Yankee. And while the mill owners loved the cheap labor and child labor that the Francos gave, the Franco-American refusal to assimilate caused a lot of friction between the political and economic classes in Biddeford. And that became problematic. But that changed dramatically because by 1890, the French-speaking people are the dominant people in Biddeford. By 1968, when I'm growing up, Biddeford was 75% Franco. You could go anywhere in this community and hear French. Downtown, they had Canadian days welcoming people from Canada to come and shop. That's changed. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Mill work wasn't easy. To work there was very difficult. The machinery was loud and dangerous, and you had to be mentally alert because if you kind of just straggled in thought, all of a sudden you might have problems with your arms and your fingers being caught in the belts and the wheels of the machinery. Stories always circulated of people losing limbs in the mills, and it was so loud you couldn't hear anything anyway. But people lasted there for a long time. Noble Sear, for example, started the mills at the age of 12. When he retired, he had worked there 64 years. I taught for 35, I thought it was a lifetime. 64 years, and others, if you read the documentation, Professor Beaupre has that written down in a number of his books. They're there for a long time to support families. Kind of the work ethic that's so Franco. I worked there one summer. I worked in the card room. I was so stupid when they said you can work in the cards. I thought it was literally cards. No, it was machinery that was loud and noisy all the time. Once I got there at 12 o'clock, I was there in that din forever. And the humidity was unbearable, and caused the machinery to go nuts on certain days. They would throw out threads all over the place, and I'd have to try to get the threads back on the wheel, and oh my God. I think I set a personal record of cussing in that stretch of time in my life because I despised it so much. And yet people were there bragging to me. Alan, I've been here 25 years. And I'm like thinking, my God, I can't do this another minute. But again, it was that type of tenacity and work ethic that just drove people to work there. And I think it was pride too, because they wanted to do a good job. I think it's important to note that the stereotyping and the derogatory view of French Canadians in Biddeford had a real negative effect on the population here. And when the DeCarys came, they heard those things. We were stereotyped as the dumb frogs. If you've lived here for any length of time, you've probably heard that over and over and over again. Part of this nativistic demeaning was based on that refusal to assimilate, to maintain the faith and the language, or to live in the little Canadas, to not intermingle. The lack of schooling was also targeted. Many people in my family, for example, never got through high school. My Uncle Beeman quit in the sophomore year. Well, I had to go work in the mills to support the family. But the other thing was the genius of being bilingual. Because a lot of people who were bilingual had heavy accents. And that too was ridiculed, which made people stop speaking French. My Meme Casavan, for example, never learned English. She used to brag to me about how, I say, Brad, you gotta understand, I never could speak French, but she couldn't speak English. But we communicated somehow, but she'd show me her green card and talk about her heritage going back. Interestingly, her best friends lived downstairs in the three-decker. Couldn't speak English either. She was Greek. My Meme and her conversed. I'm talking about the Mantis family, though, it's pizza by Alex. So Biddeford had that type of ethnicity running. Again, if you look back in the history of the Greeks and the Italians or the Jewish people, they were all here. Biddeford was diverse very early on and remains very diverse. I essentially have two links to this campus. One I've told before. I told James this. When I was a kid in high school, I used to break into the gym and play basketball. Jim Baldry knew about it, but never said a word. The other involves Stella Maris. My father went there. Not because he was an orphan, but because his mother thought he was incorrigible and had to do something to straighten him out. Those are my links. But as I said, I'm here to talk about the Franco-American connection of which I'm a part. When the DeCarries came here, and I'm not going to talk much about them because other people are going to do that, they came here as missionaries, which is kind of ironic because today, if you belong to Good Shepherd Parish, you have missionaries from Africa that are serving the Catholic population here. It's kind of switched a little bit. But they came here as missionaries, but one of their objectives was not only to have people go back to Canada and study it for the seminary or for professional trades, but also to maintain the culture and the faith because they had pride. So you think about this. You have all these people criticizing the Francos, anti-immigrant, nativistic, xenophobic, and yet they're there talking about how important it is to be Franco. So when the college opens, the goal is there to maintain that culture. One other thing I kind of skipped over too to think about, this in the background, Arthur DeCarry gets here in the 1920s. In that decade, the Ku Klux Klan was big in this particular area. They were centered in Saco, in the First Congregational Church. And during that decade, they actually marched towards Biddeford against the Catholics and the immigrants, Irish and Franco. And they were met on the Elm Street Bridge with something called Irish confetti bricks. They scurried back to Saco. But again, we forget those things. And I think it's important to understand community that you remember some things in the past because they linger even today. The stories are there, but you gotta untwine them to try to better understand what's happening. So the college opens as like 19 boys. Started the day at 6:30 in the morning with mass. They ended at 9 at night. Liberal arts types college, high school and college, okay? It was mixed. But by 1961, the decision is made to become a college only. That's sort of a pivotal time period because at that point in time, I think if you look back, you can begin to see that the Biddeford Francos are beginning to assimilate. I certainly did. I mean, as I said earlier, I don't speak French. And that was a purposeful decision. And probably one of the stupidest things that I ever did. I took French in high school by a guy named Joseph Cartier. He was a disciplinarian. I suffered in that class because I kept revolting. I didn't want to learn French. Why? Because of the stigma. I didn't want to be the dumb frog. And I was bombarded by that. Even on my favorite radio station a little bit later on, WPLM, when I was growing up in the rock and roll era, they had a character named Frenchie. the heavy French accent, and everybody made fun of him. And I remember this distinctly. You know, you have those defining moments when things change. Well, I have two in terms of my Franco-American history. One was involving a friend of mine named Michael Quintero. And I went to him and I said, I think Michael might have been mayor at the time, so it must have been the 80s. I went, Michael, there was a great joke on BLM this morning. Frenchie was talking, and he said, stop right there. Alan, you do not laugh at those things, because if you laugh at that type of humor, you perpetuate the stereotype. Oh, I had never thought of that, because I had been put to sleep, so to speak, by all the bombardment that I heard growing up. And I say that because it's important to think about, it doesn't matter what ethnic group, but think about today and the way we stereotype people and stereotype events, and how that numbs us to the realities of what the story is. So that was an awakening for me. The second was while I was teaching ethnicity at the high school. I taught for 35 years. I began to realize that my students didn't know they were Franco. Seriously. Their names, it could be Fecto, it could be Cody, it could be whatever. What are you? I don't know, American. Oh, okay. And then they start talking about their memes and pepes, and I'm like, that's Franco? You're kidding. They talked about eating pork pie and going to midnight mass. That's Franco too? And I realized we were losing something. And this is so important. That's one of the reasons why we're here. Because it's critical for a community, whether it's an academic community or a city or town, to understand its roots. And those kids were losing their roots. And so what I tried to do, I'm still doing as mayor, is connecting the dots, so to speak, so people understand where they came from. So I got a bit involved in the North American Francophone and Francophonie Cities Network, where we're linked to Quebec City and other cities in New England. I did the same with the New England Francophone group. In fact, there has been not that I even know what this is, a geocaching event that's been going on for several months. And one of the caches is actually here on UNE because President Herbert said it was okay. I don't know if he knows what it is either. But the thing, again, it's got people moving between communities to learn about the cities themselves. You know, I consider myself really blessed to be Franco. Why? Because I learned the values of hard work. I learned about self-reliance. I learned about giving back to community. Lessons that are so critical for all of us. And those are Franco traditions, traditions that were emphasized by the Dacaris when they came here and did their teaching. So it wasn't just academics, it was about values and so forth. I hope that by being here today, we can touch base with some of our ethnicities, our roots, so to speak. We've been doing some other great things here. The Cultural Center, La Kermesse, still vibrant, still part of the fabric, again, reminding people of who they are. So this all gives me hope that the beautiful culture of Quebec province will resurrect itself in some form and once again be part of the city of Biddeford. Because it's important to have pride in who we are. You know, Biddeford today is electric. There's so many great things that are happening in the city of Biddeford, so much interest. But the bones of the city, the foundation of the city, its cultural roots pulse with the blood of La Survivance. It's still there. You just gotta look for it. So again, I'm so pleased to be here today. I hope that just gives you food for thought in terms of who you are, where you come from, what you discover. Because we're today participating in a reconnection of our history as a community and a university. And I want to especially thank Diane Sear, who's out in the back. Members of the board have been in the Cultural Center. We have two over there, and I'm not sure if there's anybody else here. Dennis is out back. It is Bob. Diane has been incredible in terms of driving that new organization forward with projects like this and activities, again, making people aware of who they are, where they come from. I also want to recognize Juliana and Richard Leroux. You know, I do have some French accent. I still can do that. What they have done has been incredible in sharing. I mean, I read Juliana's blog on a regular basis, and again, making us all aware of the Franco history. At this point in time, I talked far longer than I was going to. In fact, I had a speech all written, and as usual, I did not read. I would like to introduce my friend, my good friend, President James Herbert.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le maire. Bonjour à tous, bonjour messieurs, dames, et merci beaucoup d'être venus tous. Et je vous souhaite, au nom de l'Université de New England, je vous souhaite tous la bienvenue d'être venus ici aujourd'hui sur notre magnifique campus très historique. Et ça me fait plaisir, très plaisir d'être ici parmi vous. So thank you all very much for coming. And Monsieur et Madame Delvaux, Madame de Chambaud, bien sûr, mon ami, Monsieur Facto, et tous nos professeurs auprès, bien sûr, on connaît tous Monsieur le Professeur. Thank you all so much for coming. Really appreciate you coming. And thank you, Alan, for those kind words. And he really is a buddy. One of the things he didn't tell you is that can you hear me okay? Is that we share our tips for the latest cool restaurants and distilleries and breweries in Biddeford. And one of my proudest moments, actually, was the fact that I was able to tell him about a bakery that he didn't know about. So when the president of the university knows a little secret that the mayor yet doesn't know about, say, well, I was like, well, I've made it now. And I have to say, in terms of celebrating the Franco heritage of Biddeford, I couldn't agree more with everything you said, and I learned some new things this morning, even though I've tried to learn as much as I can. You know, when I first got here, I've been now part of the community for 4 years, and I plan on never leaving. I absolutely love it here. The trustees came to me just recently and asked if I wanted to stay another term, and I said, are you kidding? It's like, sign me up. So my wife Lynn and I absolutely love being part of this community. And when, I'll never forget, I think it was my second or third day on the job, corresponded with Kermesse, and someone from the community took me down there, and I was listening to the Musique Folklorique du Québec. I was just in heaven. I thought, okay, this is where I belong. And so I want to welcome you all. And I really appreciate the Biddeford Cultural Heritage Center for hosting this, and thank you all so much for coming to our campus. I'm delighted to have you here to the home of St. Francis College, which has now become the University of New England. Just a little bit of quick history. As many of you know, St. Francis was established in 1952. The St. Francis per se, from the precursor institution, the Collège Seraphique, which was a high school and junior college. And prior to that, I mean, the roots go way, way back. And I know we have even someone here who was part of the high school back then. And then we have many anciens élèves, the alumni from St. Francis College. And in 1961, the high school had been phased out and the college became a junior college, which then became a 4-year liberal arts college. By the 70s, something happened that it actually is happening again today, which is that many of the very small liberal arts colleges were struggling to survive. But what St. Francis did is it reinvented itself. So it started having conversations with the New England Foundation for Osteopathic Medicine, a group of osteopathic doctors who got together, realizing there was no medical school in all of Maine. They traveled around the state looking for various sites to start a medical school and decided on this site. And in talking with St. Francis, both realized that this could be a win-win for both institutions. So the medical school started, there was a relationship developed, and it became the University of New England. That University of New England in the 70s, it was actually founded in the late 70s, and it was a pretty, people said like, what? University of New England? You know, what a it's a bit ostentatious to say the University of New England when basically it's this little St. Francis College, this little medical school operating out of Stella Maris and a few trailers. But the president at the time quite wisely said, we will grow into the name. And I think that's happened. And I'm very humbled to be just a little part of that continued growth. In 1996, UNE then in turn merged with Westbrook College in Portland. Similar story, Westbrook College, small college that was struggling, was becoming harder and harder to survive by the year, and then that merger just reinforced the larger University of New England. So UNE today is Maine's largest private university, and I would add the best. And I'm happy to go on and on about why we're the best, but we're Maine's largest private university. We have 3 campuses. I mentioned our core campus right here in Biddeford, the Health Sciences campus up in Portland, and then a study abroad campus in Tangier, Morocco. We also have we're a global university now. We have partnerships in France, Spain, and Iceland. We have study abroad courses all over the world. We offer more than 40 bachelor's degrees and 30 professional and graduate degrees. We have 9 institutes, research institutes or centers of excellence. We are by far the #1 provider of healthcare professionals to the state of Maine. In fact, 1 in 3 healthcare professionals in Maine is a UNE graduate. We have the state's only medical school, all of northern New England's only dental school, the only PA program, the largest nursing program with, by the way, the best board score grades. And what I love about UNE is that we don't measure ourselves by the number of students that we can exclude, by the number of students that we can reject and therefore declare ourselves, highly selective. We embrace taking students from middle-class backgrounds. Often many of our students are hardworking, sort of B+ students. They're not the high school valedictorians. We get a few of those, but that's not who our core students are. And we transform their lives. And that is exactly back to St. Francis. Those of you who are St. Francis alums, you know what I mean. I've been privileged to get to know many of the St. Francis alums. And these are hardworking folks from middle-class backgrounds, sometimes lower middle-class, working-class backgrounds, who that education completely transformed their lives. And that DNA is still what UNE is about. We are not elitist. We take regular folks and we put them on a path to transform their lives. And that's my story. I'm a first-generation college student. I worked in commercial fishing growing up, and if it weren't for my higher education, who knows if I'd even be here today. So it's something that's very personal for me. UNE continues to grow. We are, just a few stats, clinical services, our students provide over $44 million, equivalent of $44 million in clinical services to the region and to the state per year. UNE generates more than $22 million annually in state and local tax revenues. While UNE today is a very different institution than St. Francis was originally, the DNA remains the same. The core values, I mentioned the values of providing an education to those who are underprivileged, underserved, who wouldn't otherwise be able to have this kind of education. That's still very much part of our mission, that mission of access. We insist on providing a well-rounded education, so while we do stress preparing people for jobs, right, novel concept, we also are intent that they get a solid foundation in the liberal arts, because it's important that they develop those habits of mind that are going to allow them to reinvent themselves over the course of their lifetime, because the world's changing rapidly, and people have to be prepared to reinvent themselves. And so we're intent on doing that. Another Franciscan value, environmental care for the environment, the value for the environment. Environmental stewardship is a big part of what we do. And I know my buddy Al Tebow, our vice president for facilities, is always looking for ways in which we can improve our environmental stewardship. Our dedication to diversity and inclusiveness. This is something over the past year that's gotten a lot of attention, but it's nothing new to us. You heard the mayor's remarks about welcoming the Franco community and the roots of St. Francis College in that regard. That's been part of that mission of access has been part of who we are from the beginning. And the historic visit of Dr. Martin Luther King in 1964 to this campus right here that we celebrate that every year by a special event in lecture, when we bring people in, and we remember and we celebrate that. So diversity and inclusion is nothing new for us, it's something that we do. And finally, that spirit of nimbleness, the ability to be agile and reinvent itself. It's been said that universities move at the pace of a speeding glacier. And that tends to be true. In most universities, it takes a faculty committee a couple of years to decide what color to paint the bathroom. That's not UNE. We move quickly, we are agile, we are nimble, we have to be able to survive in this hyper-competitive world in higher education these days. But we're not merely surviving, we're thriving. While you're here today, I'd invite you to please walk around campus. In fact, come anytime, make yourself at home, this is your home. Walk around and enjoy the beautiful campus. I think you'll agree it's a pretty spectacular day. We ordered it special just for you. But in addition to the common greens right here, one of my favorite parts of campus is Jordan Point. And if you go right out on Jordan Point, the gazebo out there we just restored, and that's thanks to the St. Francis alums who set up a fundraising campaign. My wife Lynn and I were privileged to contribute to that as well, and we've completely restored the kiosk that sits at that historic point on Jordan Point. You look one way, you're looking up the river towards the falls, the other way you're looking out to Saco Bay. It's just stunning, and our students make great use of it. They go out there, we actually, can't really tell, but we snuck in Wi-Fi out there. So you can go out there with they go out there with their computers and their laptops, and they study and they work, and it's just a beautiful point to meditate and take in the beauty. The other, right outside here, these gardens in honor of St. Francis as well. You'll see that it's a beautiful little spot to meditate, to relax. Stella Maris, you all know Stella Maris. It was the old Jordan farmhouse originally that then went through many generations of being an orphanage, and then high school, the college. It's the oldest and most historic building on campus. Finally, if you, I could go on and on, but if you walk down to the other end of campus, right at the entrance to the Hills Beach community, there is our own little stretch of beach, Freddie Beach, which the students love. That's their place they love to go and hang out, and that's it. But one thing people often don't know, it was the site of the landing of Samuel de Champlain when he was exploring, essentially the founder of Quebec, the French explorer. He actually stopped right there at the mouth of the Saco, right at our own Freddie Beach. And we've done some archaeological digs there and have found artifacts, including Native American Wabanaki artifacts from that site. So it's a pretty spectacular campus. So thank you all. Merci beaucoup d'être venu. Thank you all for coming. And at this point, I'll turn it back over to Madame Leroux.
Very inspiring speakers. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, President Herbert, and thank you for that history. It was very eloquently expressed. Also, I was reminded that any of you who did not have a chance to register and sign in, please do so over at the Heritage Center's table, so that we have photo releases, because there's a lot of pictures going on. One of the most important pieces of this presentation today is what we will leave for future generations. This will be part of Biddeford's history, and we're very proud to have all of you here to share that today. When my husband and I started to organize this tour, we quickly became aware of how much interest we felt from the entire community. It wasn't going to be just about two people talking about St. Francis. It was very energizing when I heard friends and interested callers call me with their stories about how they were involved or affected by the St. Francis community. There is also a deep and sustained reverence for the fathers Arthur de Carey, who was a Monsignor, and his brother, Father Zoran de Carey. They are founders of this St. Francis College. So I am so honored to have a few of those people who have expressed their interest to be here with us. And thankfully, after I asked, they agreed to speak, and I'm very grateful to all of you for agreeing to do that, and to talk very briefly about how the Franciscans and the education they received here impacted their growth and development as integrated adults in the community in the way that President Herbert laid out, very much in the Franciscan way of teaching. I also want to take a minute to acknowledge the fact we have Speaker Fecto here today. And I want to tell you that in a shadow life I have, I spend way too much time in Augusta, Maine. And I am so proud to see the fact that Mayor Casavant has been a legislator, Senator DeChambeau is a state senator. Your Speaker of the House of Representatives is here in Biddeford, Brian Fecto, thank you. And I just want to tell you how incredibly special that is to see our legislators from York County as Franco-Americans. And I say that we've studied this at length, and it's very important to know that this really speaks very well. And you know, the thing that you need to know is people think that, oh, the Franco-Americans in Maine, oh, they live up in the county, don't they? Oh, no, they're in Lewiston, right? No, they live right here in York County. And we did a community assessment based on community census data, and the majority of self-identified Franco-Americans in Maine live in York County, not in Lewiston, not in Aroostook County. So you're very well represented here. Yeah, that report is in the Maine legislature there, gathering dust on the shelf somewhere.
We'll read the last.
Yeah, we're exactly right. So the very first speaker I want to introduce, I'm going to introduce all of the speakers. You have this fabulous program that that Diane put together, and I thank you, Diane. This is just lovely. And so the program is going to flow right along. I don't want us to spend a lot of time introducing one person after another. The schedule is right here. And what I'd like to do is to have each of these speakers introduce the next speaker, and then at the end, I'd like all the speakers to come up here so we can give everyone one round of applause and get our pictures taken, okay? Then we're going to move here to the walking tour. We're going to go to the Heritage Park, which is right outside that door. I don't even think it's an eighth of a mile, not even that. Beautiful park. And Professor Beaupre is going to give us an orientation on the park, because it includes the original statues from DeCary Hall that were moved there. And then we're going to take the short walk over to the Franciscan Cemetery, where Dennis Letelier is going to speak to us about the founders, the DeCary brothers, Father Zern and Father Arthur. And then I'll have a question and answer period there. And from there, for those who want to stay, we do have the opportunity, thanks to Alan Tebow, for us to take a short tour of the DeCary Hall, which is where all the students lived, worked, and attended classes when it was a high school and college. But we're going to have to go through that foyer, regardless if you want to tour the building or not. We're going to go through the foyer so that you can then exit through Leonard Hall, which is where you will see, and I really wouldn't miss it, the Martin Luther King exhibit from when he was here in 1964. It's a beautiful exhibit, thank you. So right now, I'm going to let my husband introduce himself. He is a graduate of the class of 1955. He's also a United States Navy veteran, and you'll hear more about that. And he's going to talk about his experience with the Franciscans. Following him, we're going to have Patricia Terrian Boston, whose father was one of my husband's teachers here at St. Francis. And then following her, we have Mr. Gagnon, and then we have one of our co-ed students, Senator DeChambeau. Then Norman Beaupre would like 5 minutes here before we move to the Heritage Park or Plaza. And then when we get to the cemetery, Mr. Dennis Letelier will be speaking. So, Richard, thank you.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Richard Lheureux, and for my Anglo friends, I use Richard Lure in Sanford and Richard LaRue in the rest of the state. I was born in 1937 on Fremont Street in Sanford. It was the heart of the Great Depression, and yes, I lived in a Franco neighborhood in a French-speaking family. Things were rough. We were talking about another world war in Europe. My dad was 45, my mother was 42. I had siblings aged 7, 8, 9, and 10. You could say, yeah, I was an oops. But I was born in a loving family. Our family was very close, and we did everything together. And, you know, it was one of these situations. Yeah, we were poor. I can remember my parents, my dad was a barber, thinking, my mother saying, Bill, how are we going to afford the mortgage? You know, it's up to $1 a week. But things went by. I got older, my siblings had moved away, and I was now 14 years of age, and my parents realized, boy, this kid needs a lot of discipline, and he needs a lot of education. As Julie mentioned, my mother grew up in Biddeford. As a matter of fact, our family lived on Pike Street. When my grandfather passed away, and my aunts and uncles, my maternals and minnows had moved away, my grandmother lived with her youngest daughter, Georgiana Cody, and her husband, Wilfred. They lived in Biddeford in the summer, and they had a summer home here at Hills Beach. And we visited them often. When we went to Hills Beach to visit my grandmother, we'd come by and drive by St. Francis School. And my mother would say, isn't that a beautiful building? And they were added to the campus. And all of a sudden, DeCary Hall was there. My mother would say, you know, your cousin, Father Conrad, was the first student to enroll here in 1939. And his brother Donald came here also. He spent 2 years in college. And he was the assistant basketball player. That's I know. Wasn't that interested? What, you know, when you're 12, 13 years old, no? What are you thinking? Well, one day we were coming back from my grandmother's house, and there was a big sign, open house. And my mother says, let's stop and we'll go see what the building looks like. So we did. I had 2 friends with me from Sanford, and the 3 of us, and my parents toured the DeCary Hall. My mother said, wow. And I said, yeah, wow. She says, how would you like to go to school here? And I said, sure, that would be fantastic. But I said, I doubt very much that they'll accept me, and I don't know if we can afford it. Monday morning, my mother called. Father Norman answered the phone. He said, sure, come on in on Thursday, and we'll talk to Richard. I got my transcripts from St. Ignatius Grammar School, and we drove to Biddeford Pool, and I was accepted. And a few weeks later, I was on my way to boarding school. I figured, man, that's not bad. My parents live in Sanford. My grandmother is down at Hills Beach. I'm not going to be very far from family. Most of the friends that I had here at St. Francis were from the county. Francos who had come here to learn a better way of speaking English. The rest of the kids were from either from Maine and the other 5 New England states, and we even had 2 from New York. When I got here, I didn't know what to expect. But I came to realize that these Franco and these Franciscan priests and teachers were phenomenal. You know, they were able to teach us discipline, academics, how to get along with one another, and we even learned apologetics. The thing that I remember most is how they not only our teachers, but they were our friends. They played basketball with us. They threw pitches. They played catch. We went out and played tennis in the tennis courts. We would go down to the point and jump off the rocks to go swimming. We'd go to Fortune's Rock for beach parties. It was a real community. One of the professors I remember the most, and I don't know if anybody here remembers him, but was Father Edmund. Father Edmund was an older gentleman. We had him for religion in my sophomore year, and he was the Greek and Latin teacher for the college. Father Edmund was not only a teacher, but he was an active hypnotist, and he had been an exorcist. When we would get him started, he would give us stories that made the hair stand on the back of your neck and keep us up at night. We also had 2 lay teachers. One of them was Frederick Warner. He had been a student here, and he was our English, He was our physics teacher, and he was American history teacher. And then we had Mr. Therrien, Pat's dad. Ernest Therrien had more influence on me than any man I've ever met. English was a second language. All of a sudden, I realized that, whoa, I've got to drop this accent. He was not only our English teacher, but he was our public speaking teacher as well. And at that time, a lot of emphasis was placed on public speaking. I mean, after all, they expected us to go on to become Franciscan monks and become teachers. So public speaking was competitive. Not only did we have to speak in front of our own classes and judged by our own peers, but twice a year we would stand before the school body and they would say who was the best. My freshman year, like I say, English was a second language. It was a little rough. I remember my first public speaking event. Mr. Therrien had come up to me and he handed me a sheet of paper and he says, memorize this. It will take you about 10 minutes to give the presentation. So about 10 days later, he came up in the class, he says, Mr. LaRue, you're next. I came up, I remember I did the whole thing in about 3 minutes. And he looked at me and he says, well, that was quick. In my sophomore year, things went better, and they improved even more in my junior year. And by my senior year, I won the school championship, and Mr. Therrien came up to me and says, get ready, in 2 weeks we're going up to Orono, where you're going to speak at the University of Maine, representing St. Francis for the entire state. Long story short, I brought home the gold. When I left St. Francis, I joined the Navy. It was quite a difference, but believe it or not, Navy boot camp was easy compared to what it was at St. Francis. The discipline had been more restrictive here than it was in boot camp. But my public speaking continued to help. I went aboard my first ship, I was in the personnel department, and I was involved in orientation. And I continued to do that on 3 aircraft carriers, 2 squadrons. I was sent to school and ended up in recruiting duty in Baltimore. And I talked my way into, wedding and proposition, and she accepted. Then it was off to school again, this time Marine boot camp, because I had been assigned to the Seabees, and we went to Chu Lai in Vietnam in 1967. Upon coming back from Vietnam, I went to school again, this time at the American University in Washington, D.C. And also, I finished my 4 years of education at Laverne University in Los Angeles, California. My next assignment was 4 years in Norfolk, Virginia, in the prison system, and 3 years in the Philippines, again in the prison system. I was a counselor there. Upon leaving the prison system, I can say I was honored to be appointed as the Command Master Chief and Senior Enlisted Advisor at the largest naval training center in the world, in Great Lakes. When I left the Navy, came back to Sanford, 2 boys, and a girl who says, you're bringing me to Maine? I got a job, as a matter of fact, I got a position as Human Resource Director for an engineering firm. And I was there for almost 10 years. I had heard that the company was about to be sold out to a Swedish firm, and so I went up to Portland and went to Unum, the insurance company, to see, well, do you have any openings? They said, yeah, we have 2 positions you might be interested in. One is in the Human Resource Department, and the other one is enrolled. And I said, enrolled? She says, yeah. She says, that's where you stand before an audience and talk about their benefits, why they might use them, how to use them, and if they can afford them. And she says, if you take that job, there's a good chance that you might travel to the other 5 New England states if you can pass the insurance test. I went to Unum, and within a short period of time, I found myself to be in charge of all the enrollers, teaching them public speaking and plant farm skills. And yeah, I got licensed in the other 5 New England states. As a matter of fact, of the 9,000 plus employees at Unum worldwide, I was the only one to be licensed in all 50 United States. And I went to all of them. When I was in the Navy, I had traveled aboard ship to different U.S. territories. Between quarter calls and over 1 million frequent flyer miles, I've been to 82 countries. So yeah, I've come a long ways in what it seemed was going to be open for me when I was born in 1937 during the Depression. I can stand here this morning and be so proud to say it was a great ride. And I thank Franciscans, my Franco heritage, and I wouldn't have had it any other way. At this time, I'd like to introduce Pat Terrian Boston. Now, Pat, I remember when you were born. I remember here at the Curry Hall, one morning, I don't remember what day of the week it was, but that's why Julie asked you what month. It was in November. Some kid, I don't know who it was running down the hallway, banging on all the doors, saying, "The Terrians have a girl, the Terrians." So Pat, you're next.
No, I think that, is this okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I found a few photos online, and I didn't know that I was going to be able to project them, so I have some handouts, and I don't know. Thank you so much. Yes, my name's Pat Boston. My dad, Ernest Terrian, and in the back of the room is my son.
Hey, Mom.
My son Timothy, and I know my dad would be happy to be here with you today. My dad was also born in Sanford, from two parents who were born in the province of Quebec, so also from a Franco heritage. And he came to St. Francis to join the faculty in 1949. So in the early years he was here, and he taught in the high school. He taught English and history. And then as things evolved, he was a professor of economics. He was chairman of the Department of Social Sciences. He also served as registrar and 1 year as acting president in the early 70s. So he got to see the school through things. One of the sayings my father had, and I tried to look it up to see if it was an original or not, it was, "If I can't be the best, let me be the worst. I don't want to be mediocre." And I think that was something he lived by, but I think a lot of the faculty, staff, everybody who was involved in this institution really lived by that motto. And I think they were all striving to be the best and provide the best for the people that they were here to serve. My mother also worked here as a secretary for a while. She was a secretary to the dean, actually, when Fred Warner was the dean. And two of Fred Warner's children are here today, Angela and Ted. And she was also secretary of the president, Father Clarence, when Father Clarence was president during those years. And as has already been mentioned, they didn't just see their mission as education, but really formation of these young people who were entrusted to them because they were predominantly boarding students. There were occasional day students, but and it was really something to which they had a very firm commitment. My dad actually took 1 year off and worked for an insurance company for a short while, trying to make more money to support his family. And he was working for John Hancock, and he was very successful to the point that they wanted to transfer him to Chicago and offered him a salary that I think had an extra zero at the end over what he was earning here at the school. And he was debating what to do. He was contemplating coming back or pursuing this transfer. And he recounted this to me as my mother just left the decision in his hands, and she just said, whatever you want to do is what we're going to do. And he really struggled and decided that this was where he needed to be. This was his place. And I'm certainly glad that he did, because I think probably Angela and Ted can attest to this, but it was really a privilege and a blessing to grow up in what I've always called the extended family that was St. Francis College and the people who were here. And I'm seeing other people nod. A lot of the faculty were young. They were raising young families. They weren't making very high salaries, so they did a lot of their socialization together. Whether it was a card game at someone's house on a Saturday night with a bowl of popcorn, or John Biter's pig roasts, or just getting together after work around someone's kitchen table and having a conversation about either a campus issue or something that was going on socially, politically, something that was out there. I also discussed this with Louise Sutton several years ago when we were at John Biter's 50th wedding anniversary. And just to confirm that I wasn't the only one who felt this way about the environment in which we grew up here, that it was really a blessing. And one of the handouts that you're getting, those were from the yearbook from 1958. And the top one shows some of the faculty members, Bill Sutton in the back, Wayne Legault, my dad, Fred Warner, and then in the front, Herbie Poisson, Marcel Cloutier, and John Gellison. Now, at the time, the Suttons lived at Hills Beach, the Legaults lived at Hills Beach. We did, Fred Warner did, John Gellison did. So there were, geographically, it was also a community because they were our neighbors as well. And there were others that you would know. John Biter lived at Hills Beach, Jan and Joe Greer, Bob and Joan Mento. The Hennedys for a while lived at Hills Beach. So they were also, they were friendly. The second picture that I put on there, the Guild, the Ladies Guild, was formed in 1958. And you see these women who are the Guild members. And you can just tell by looking that they were friendly, they were comfortable with each other, that there was good rapport. And they were interesting people. And all of these ladies were in the Hills Beach neighborhood as well. And although this is an aside, I just feel it's important to mention Rena Gellison, who's the first lady on the left. There was an Auschwitz survivor. And she wrote a book called Rena's Promise. So there were some very interesting people that we interacted with as children growing up who were influential. And we also interacted with the religious folk, with the priests and the brothers who were here at St. Francis, because they were the friends and colleagues of our parents. And they would drop by the house, and they were just part of our lives. Not to the extent they were for the students, but I think a great deal. In fact, I recognize some of the pictures that Zachary was showing me earlier. One of the life lessons they taught, they were wonderful role models, was when they did get together around the kitchen table and have a discussion, I think we learned that you could disagree with someone wholeheartedly, vehemently, and still walk away friends. That you could separate that. And I know now we all mourn the loss of civil discourse and difference of opinion, but I think that's one of the lessons that was a very valuable one that I learned. And we called all these people as aunt and uncle, right? It was Uncle Fred and Aunt Helen. Mrs. Sutton, though, was ma tante because of the French influence. But that's the kind of family atmosphere that we had. The chapel was our church. You know, those of us who lived in this neighborhood, this is where we came for our religious functions. On a personal note, I did go to school at Stella Maris when it was open as a elementary school through the 4th grade, because that's when St. Francis College bought the property from the Sisters of the Presentation of Mary. And, but the priests were the ones who came to the Stella Maris to perform the masses for us My first communion I received in the chapel at Stella Maris by Father Flood, who is the other picture that's on that handout, who is the last, I believe, last living Franciscan who taught on this campus. He's in his 90s and he's in Canada, Montreal right now. Had it not been for the border issues of COVID, I think he would have been here. His nephew, David Flood, some of you may know, lives in Bedford. And that's his uncle, known as Father Ethelbert at the time, before they gave up the religious names. And talk about French, yeah, I want to say something that the mayor referred to. When I had to transfer from Stella Maris to the 5th grade at St. Andre's, that was a half day of French. We had a little bit of intro to French at Stella Maris, but not a half a day. And it was shock, because we didn't speak French at home, and I thought I'm never going to catch up, but, but I did. Just some of the other, I mean, I got married in the chapel of St. Francis by Father Donald McNair, that some of you may know. Father Frederick, after whom Frederick Hall is named, gave me a rosary that he brought back from the trip to Rome that had been blessed by the Pope. There were just a lot of those connections that we had. In 1974, my father left this campus and went to Massachusetts and began another segment of his career there. He did return in 2001 for the class of 1951, having their 50th reunion at Wormwoods, and he asked me to go with him, which I did. And I remember as we got out of the car and were walking into the restaurant, the first words I heard was, "Monsieur Terrien!" Again, the French. And the group was so happy to reunite. Many had not seen each other for a long time. But there were people who had had very accomplished careers in the military, in government, in DC, in business. You know, the life skills and the people skills that they learned, they had really carried on with them. On another occasion, Dad came up for part of an alumni weekend, and I was walking back to the car with him, and a student approached, and they had a little conversation. I'm sorry. And I remember my dad looking at me after, and he was emotional. And he said, "You know, it's nice to know you made a difference." And that was about all he could say that day. Anyway, he passed away in 2010. And in 2011, he was given the honorary alumni award here on campus. And I had the privilege of accepting that award on his behalf. So I think a lot of us in the room can relate to the fact that St. Francis had a very impactful impression on us. And I think that we would not say that this was mediocre by any stretch of the imagination, and that it did make a difference in a lot of lives. Do I have a minute more? Oh no, I won't be able to say that. Tell that story. Joe will have to tell his own story.
Who is that?
Joe Valenza. But I thank you for listening, and I want to conclude with the Franciscan greeting that my father always used at the closing of a letter and an email. And I wish you peace.
It's not a dry eye. Oh, it was really lovely. Okay, so
Welcome. Nice to see all of you. I'm not used to a microphone. My whole career was working in a prison, so I usually talk real loud. So, well, when you're 6 to speak, you want to make comments about what everybody else said. I didn't write anything down, but I'm good to ad-lib anyways. First of all, I want to recognize 3 people I especially invited, and I'm so glad they joined us from out of state. Richard Forrest and
Thank you, Suzanne. It's a pleasure to be here.
Richard, these gentlemen graduated in '70. I graduated in '71. And Richard was a teacher for many years, and he's from Massachusetts. And Raymond Gagnon, many of you know also, Richard and Raymond are on the Alumni Council, and Raymond was...
I don't sing.
he was a New Hampshire state legislator and a U.S. Marshal. And my buddy also, Bill O'Brien. Bill was here, and he retired from New York City Fire Department. And he was with 9/11, and we talk about that a lot. So, and he has moved to Scotland. So we have been friends, I guess, for 50 years. And that can explain to you a little bit about coming to St. Francis College, being in the class, the first class with women. I would like to tell you a little bit about myself because it's very interesting what people are saying. You were raised in Sanford, and Alan, of course, was in Biddeford. I was raised on Porter Street next to White Star Laundry, which was owned and operated by my grandparents and was in existence for 101 years. Some of you are old enough, if you came to St. Francis, you wore your tie and your sports coat, well, you sent your clothes to White Star Laundry, and I took care of it. My grandparents, La Rochelle, were entrepreneurs. They, every single one of them had a business in the turn of the century. We're talking 1910 or so. My father, however, the Deschambault, he is one of 16 children, 8 boys, 8 girls. They all worked in the mill. And I was raised, and so were my brothers and sisters. We lived right next door to White Star Laundry, same driveway. It's a big New England house. It's not a duplex. Always, even my son, who is 37, and I sold the house 5 years ago, always raised with 3 generations. Meme and Pepe were there, my mom and dad, and 5 kids. So that tells you a little bit about what I went through. My real name is not Susan Arlene. When Alan said that about changing a name, I don't know if I was embarrassed, but I changed it to Susan Arlene. My real name on my birth certificate is Suzanne Aline Deschambault. So the real one, and Raymond's the only one that calls me Suzanne. So I wish I could use it now, but I think the legislature would not want me to change my name. I wrote down what you said. St. Francis College transformed a life. I went to St. Joseph High School, run by nuns from Canada, which was strict. St. Joseph is now St. James. Same building was St. Louis, all the guys, and then in a corner were the girls. 47 girls graduated from my class. Almost every subject was taught in French. I think math was taught in French. So I wanted to be going to college. No one in my family had ever been to college. We didn't know how to apply. I didn't know what to do. So I decided I was going to go to VISTA, Volunteers in Service to America. That was the American version of the Peace Corps. Didn't know how to do that either. So I ended up working for 18 months, 3rd shift, components, making little batteries for transistor radios. I came home one day and told my father I was tired, and he goes, "You got another 50 years of this crap." I sat down, opened the Journal Tribune, and on the front page there was an article that Linda Pettit, I graduated the year before she did, is the first female admitted to St. Francis College. And then it went on to say they were gonna be co-ed. The article was placed in August. School started in September. The next day, I got my little butt right in here, and without a transcript or anything, I think it was John Mercado, sat there and he says, "You're accepted." So here I am going to college. I always wanted to go to college because I wanted to be a social worker. I love telling the story. I was 12 years old, and I'm really not a book reader. But I took out a book from MacArthur's library, and the title of the book was Our Rejected Children. I don't read nonfiction, I want the facts. And it was about orphanages and how they disciplined kids, they would put the hose on them. And here I was 12, thinking what it would be like to be an orphan and put the hose on them. And said, when I grow up, I'm not gonna do that, and I'm gonna work with kids. Well, you gotta go to college first. So I came here, and I'll speak about that a little bit, but I want you to know that my first job was at Stevens School for Girls in Hollowell, Maine, which was a training school. It closed 3 years later, and I had a chance to work with adult women. You know, first social worker for adults in the state of Maine in prisons. And I worked for 43 years for the Maine Correctional Center. And that's what's transforming a life is all about. If I hadn't been here at St. Francis, I wouldn't have gotten a degree. So I shake about this because number one, my career was everything, and it catapulted me to the state senate. During my career, I'm a single mom. My son is now 37, raised him. And during working, I got interested and wanted to be a police commissioner in Biddeford. And I applied and got that, and from there, city council, planning board. I never realized I was doing anything other than contributing to your community. My uncle had been mayor in the 60s. And that's how I ended up in the State House. Someone retired, resigned, and they were looking for someone that is known in the area. Pam Boston has been my campaign manager for 8 elections. And Angela was my hairdresser, and we used to talk about her dad, Fred Warner, all the time. There was always jokes to do. St. Francis College, okay, the only female, well, the second female admitted. 1967, 600 males, 20 females. I always say St. Francis prepared me for a lifetime of working with convicted felons. That's basically, I knew every antic, every story, every trick, and it kept me very calm. So, what was it like? I was a townie, number one, so I never had a college life. But I do recall being so incensed. They talked about having a dance Saturday night, and I figured, well, I'll be lucky, 600 guys in me. But no, this bus came up from St. Joseph College. The girls, it was an all-girls college. This was an all-men's girls. I shouldn't say men and girls, women and men, I guess. And so I did not know that. That's what it was like to be a female for the first few years. Westbrook, the big difference between the females from St. Joseph College and the females from Westbrook Junior College, big difference. But they used to come and we'd have the dances in the gym. I remember that distinctly because I thought, well, you know, whatever. But that went on for a while. I guess I got interested in government affairs because I was, the guys from the class of '70 know that I was very close. There were no females in the student council, it was all males, but I loved it, and I got very close with Tom Salatiello, just passed away. He was the president of the Student Senate. He was my friend also for 50 years, so. How school, I thought I was a pretty smart person. And I gotta tell you, another one that I had a relationship for 50 years was John Bider, and he also just passed away, was my professor. There were no such things as taking courses in social work. So I majored in sociology/philosophy. I was able to get a double major because my senior year, I was lucky enough for 3 years to work with Coach Beaudry as his first secretary in the athletic department. I remember my senior year, the registrar came in and told Mr. Beaudry, Sue has already graduated. And they go, what do you mean? She's graduating in 71. No, she's got enough credits to graduate now. We can't give her a scholarship. I don't know what happened, but Mr. Beaudry arranged for me to stay there for another 6 months. But that's why I got a double major. So there was no no social work, and everything I've done in social work has been the way I think social work should be conducted. I don't know, I'm trying to say, about other things that went on. I think, there were professors too. I told you I was close to John Bider, but there's another person, we didn't mention Jack Downs, he's passed, but his wife is a friend of Pat's and I, and we go to every Martin Luther King celebration with Eva Downs, so she still lives in Kennebunkport, and she's a treasure. So, so those are the kinds of things that stay with you at St. Francis. I wanted to mention about being French and going to college. And at my house, we always spoke French. It's not the Parisian French like Dr. Herbert, but c'est comme ça, you know? It's a bit of Quebec French, and I know, that reminded me, we do have Franco Day in the legislature. COVID put a kibosh on that last year. And the first year I was in the Senate, I was President pro tem, conducting the whole meeting in French with the ambassador from France, some dignitary from Canada, and I thought, oh boy, I'm blowing this. And they came to me and they were so nice. And they say, oh, we love your accent. Hey, because it's that way. I haven't changed that. You say the same thing. You want to know where that accent comes from. It's being raised by Meme and Pepe. And I am very lucky to have Meme and Pepe. So I will conclude with this, really, is I want you to know that every time I get up and give a speech on the floor, if it has something to do and I can squeeze it in, I tell them I'm a graduate of St. Francis College / UNE. I have carried bills and testified. Whenever there's a bill that comes up that affects the college, I call them up, and I'm sure Ryan does also. And the first speech I ever gave had to do with the dental school. And everybody was gonna pass it. I was only there 1 week. Didn't know anything about the bill. Called someone from UNE and said, what do you think of this bill? They said, we hate it. This is gonna hurt us. I went to the Senate president. I was there only a week. And he said, you're new? You want time? I says, give me the weekend and I'll have a speech Monday morning. I did, and the bill failed. So But those are the kinds of things we do, and that's the commitment I have to St. Francis. Again, it transformed my life. Because of this school, I was thinking of that driving in. Because of what I did and really committed myself, I think of the thousands of prisoners that I helped. I could not have done that. And frankly, I wouldn't have trusted anybody else to do it as well. So thank you very much. It's great to see you. Oh, that's what we got our freshman year.
Well, you can certainly feel the pride and the emotion in this room. I am overwhelmed and touched with the emotion. And we have a very brief 5 minutes with Professor Beaupre before we begin our walking tour. And Norman, would you like to say a few words? I just can't thank everyone enough for your participation and support. Okay, here you go.
About 30 years ago, I went to Brazil for the second time on the Fulbright Hayes, and I had a friend who was a dean here, Michael Morris, and he wanted a statue of St. Francis, and I bought myself one. So today, Président Hébert, I'm presenting you with the wood carving of the legacy and heritage of St. Francis College.
Yeah, and it's St. Francis Center Stage.
And I want to tell you, I'm very proud of this Red Letter Day because I am signing my contract as a writer with Macmillan International.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you, Norman. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. I also want to, again, thank the University of New England, President Herbert. I want to thank Zachary Enright back there, the archivist for UNE. He's in the Westbrook campus, and he so graciously provided us with that exhibit. I also want to thank Cindy and Alan Teeber, and you have been fantastic. I really appreciate it. So let's give them a round of applause. Somewhere around here, I'm going to try to get more pictures, but we can convene. Norman, do you want to go first and go out to Heritage? And Norman he was the organizer, the fundraiser, the dedicator of Heritage Plaza, and he saved the statues that had been in DeCary Hall, and he reformed them into this beautiful park that you will see.
If you want to pick up a muffin on the way out, there's plenty over here on the table. Please help yourself.
Thank you. You did a great job. So he and his daughter are here, and Norman, enlighten us. Bonjour.
Bonjour.
I got a call from President Edward Reynolds, who was a former president of Bates College. He was here. He said, Norman, we've taken down the statuary from DeCary Hall, and it's under a building somewhere. And before it rots or something happens to it, I know you're interested. Yes? But what do I do? There's no funds. Oh. So I started raising money. My wife went to Mass in the morning. Little old ladies would give her 50 cents here and there. So that's fine. It's from the population. Fortunately, my good friend Ronald Druin said, Norman, we'll get to work on this. He had an engineer look at this place and gave him a plan, and he said it would cost about $40,000. Right, wow, we're gonna get $40,000. But we were successful. We raised close to $42,000 to have all of this dug up and then move the statuary here. And you can see the Christ teacher, which was on right on the face of the Carey Hall, if you remember. It was done by John Amor from New York. It was a real artist. It's a real work of art. Next to it, we have St. Francis and the Animals, which is at far end of the Carey Hall. So those are the two statuaries that were moved here, and it was dedicated in 1998, called the Heritage Plaza. And if you read a plaque over there, it says the Heritage Plaza honors and celebrates the Franciscan heritage of the University of New England. In the fall of 1933, Fathers Arthur and Zenon Ducary brought the Franciscan monks from Montreal and gave them land. A junior college known as the Collège Séraphique was established to service the academic cultural needs of Franco-Americans of New England. Then it became a liberal arts institution. The statuaries here are part of the tradition, and Heritage Plaza is an environment providing rest, solace, and peace. And so I am very glad that it was implemented. And at first I thought, well, people agree that it's good, and will students adhere to it? Well, this was one of the favorite spots of students to come here and read, to pray, I'm not sure. And then we had the benches. The alumni contributed to that. And there's a plaque here for the contributors, and I'm proud that my name is on there. I remember contributing $2,000 for this. Everything costs money. So all in all, the Heritage Plaza is a testimony to St. Francis and St. Francis College, and now the University of New England. And I'm very proud that I was successful in bringing this to this area. Enjoy it. I think when you come here and find solace and peace, it is Franciscan. And if you ever been to Assisi, as I have, you get about the same environment and aura that exists there and over here. And St. Francis College, although I moved on to Brown University and then came back here and taught for a little over 30 years, St. Francis College is really part of my heart and soul. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
What we're going to do today is Father Justin. He was the first Franciscan to come here, and he was the principal. He was the first principal of St. Francis College. Here at the request of Father Zenwa. Father Zenwa is buried over here, and he passed away in 1920. And then his brother Arthur, he was the Monsignor at St. Joseph. And I'll just read a couple of his notes. Father Zenwa was born June 15, 1870 in St. Lawrence, close to Montreal. He was ordained 1894 in Montreal, September 29. He came to Biddeford before his brother did. He came to Biddeford to the St. Andrew's Parish when they were building it in 1902, and he left in 1907, and he went up to Presque Isle and Augusta, and he taught over there. In 1904, Father Zenwa requested the nuns of Presentation of Mary to come to staff the St. Andrew's School, a convent that was built in 1960 that he helped build. And then Father Zenwa, they came from a very wealthy family in Montreal. And if you go to Montreal now, they have a road that's called the DeCarey Road. And on that DeCarey Road, the family had a really large farm, and they were very wealthy. So whenever either one of the brothers, when they were over here, if they needed money for a project or, like building a school or anything like that, they'd go to to Montreal. They sell a portion of the land. They took the money and they came back and yes, yeah. It's only called- When Father Zenwa was first here before his brother came, they needed a bell for St. Andrew's Church. So he went to Canada, got the money, came back, and he paid for the bell. Father Zenwa, he passed away in 1940. Father DeCarey, Father Arthur, he was born October 12, 1872. He was ordained in 1899. In 1919, he became the pastor of St. Andrew's Church, and then that's when Zenwa came back with him. Both of them were together. And then in 1925, both of them, they built St. Andrew's School. In 1930, St. Joseph was building St. Louis High School. So both of the brothers paid for half of St. Louis High School. And the parish paid. In 1930, they invited the brothers of the Sacred Heart to come to St. Andrew's School. And I think some of the brothers are buried here, but they were Franciscans. They came from Montreal. In 1932, they came over here, and then they purchased Stella Maris, and they purchased all the land that belonged to it belonged to the Jordan family. So they purchased all the land that was over here in 1932. In 1933, they renovated the Jordan House into Stella Maris into an orphanage for girls. In 1937, they built St. Andrew's Home for unwed mothers on the Full Road. They built that. And then just a short deviation from that, my parents came here in 1947 from Canada. And then my mother went to work at the Peppermill. My father went to work at St. Andrew's out here. He was a farmer who took care of the cows and things like that. And when my mother got pregnant, I was born there. And back then it was Dr. Fortier. He was just kind of getting into medical practice. And he's the one that used to deliver all the babies and do anything. And so he was the doctor who delivered me. And then in 1949, I was baptized by Arthur DeCarey. Okay, so that was 1937. 1939, they built the St. Francis. They started over here. It was a small building. There used to be a building over here. It was a wooden building, and then they moved that wooden building now. It's located on the Guinea Road, and that's where the Franciscans, when the Franciscans used to teach at St. Andrew's School over here, they used to live over here, and but there was a small house, and then they started building St. Francis College. But the Franciscans that used to teach in Biddeford used to live here. So 1943, they built St. Andrew's High School for girls. 1947, they built Notre Dame Hospital that was over here, and it had 125 beds. 1949, they needed a place. See, this was a high school and college for boys. They needed a place for the girls to go. So Marie Joseph Academy, they bought the hotel that was there, and they converted that into girls for high school and college. Now, for that part, Father Zenwa passed away in 1940. You know the illness that he had, right?
Yep, I would tell them about it.
Oh,
I haven't told them yet.
you're going to tell them about it. Okay. Now, okay, in 1950, Arthur DeCarey, the one that's buried there, he left, the city of Biddeford, and he went back to Montreal to live in Montreal. And then when the two brothers used to live here, they always were together, and they used to walk from St. Andrew's there. They used to live at St. Andrew's Rectory, like at St. Andrew's Church. They used to walk all the way down to here, and people would offer ride, and they would never accept the ride. And every time that they went to Canada, they went by the train. The train used to go to Montreal, and they used to go, but they never rode in the car, and they thought that it was not a good thing to ride in the car. And in 1957, on December 30th, Father Harry was outside by his mailbox, and he was putting letters in his mailbox. And a car hit him. And he passed away then.
He was dragged 40 feet. He died of his injuries.
So they dug up the grave to check him out, and then they took a piece of hair from him, and then Pat in her collection has a finger that they cut off of him, but Pat's going to talk about that.
Since you mentioned that.
How old was he when that accident happened?
He was 78 when he graduated, so he was 80.
That was Monsignor Arthur.
That was 7 years afterwards. 7 years, so he was about 82, 83. And he was putting, it was
What a sad
after
way to
Christmas, and he was
go.
putting letters in his mailbox.
The
But,
irony of it all.
they're
though,
both buried
when you think
here,
of it, the
and then-
irony of it all.
And then some of the other, these were all Franciscans that are buried here. But this was the first Franciscan. He was the principal of St. Francis High School
Can I
College.
pass that around? People in the back would like to see it.
Yeah.
If you want to take it
Okay.
back there? Do you want to walk it back?
Yeah, I
No,
can.
Pat?
What this is first, before my little talk, is the Father Monsignor Arthur had made the finger of his brother. He's got a piece of bone in here, which is right here, and then the hair is encircled on either side. It's done just like Rome would want if he's going to become a priest. I mean, saint.
So I think we're just going to
Recognized saint.
Yeah.
Good. It's a relic. We can't really call it a relic until he's canonized. but We're prepared.
Go ahead, we have a few
Okay,
minutes.
so I'm so pleased to have been asked to be part of this acknowledgement event today. It's had miracles done by Father Zeno also. Father Labar, for one, who is still alive, but he's in Florida, Father Zeno had healed him 2 times. And the first time was when he was about, let's say 1.5, 2 years old. You know, they used to have those washing machines.
Oh, the
And then you'd
ringers.
have to take it and put it in another tub for rinsing. Well, his older sibling was fighting with him over a book, and he pulled himself and fell into the tub of boiling water. And
Oh, my God.
That was what happened to him the first time. And to this day, you can still see the burn, scalding marks on him. The flesh. It was scarred. And anyways, later on he had a convulsion, and Father Zeno healed him of that. Never had another one after that. So, our group is trying to get Father Zeno to become a saint, and so we are. You might ask, how did I get involved in this? I mean, I was born years after Father Zeno died. I knew nothing of him. Why am I interested in this? I think I was coerced, but that's not quite the word for it, because let me say that from the day that I found out about him in a mortuary card that I picked up at St. Joseph's Church one day, I took this card and I took it home and I showed it to my husband, and I said, "Did you ever hear of this guy?" I said, "Why is his card still around? This is what, 50 years later? Why are we still showing cards like that?" Well, lo and behold, I put it on my memory board in my kitchen, so every time I walked by to the rest of the house, I would go by him. And then all of a sudden, I would get a phone call and ask me something about Father Zeno. And I thought that was rather strange, because nobody knew I had this card. Why were they asking me about Father Zeno? Well, before I knew it, and honest to God, it took less than a week. I was getting phone calls almost on a daily basis. I said, "What is going on? I don't know what is going on." But nonetheless, it happened, and I eventually found out there was a Joe Bergeron who had put the card in the thing, and he had been healed by Father Zenon too, and he was pushing for people to have the canonization first, but they were all older men, and nobody had any knowledge on how to do it and what to go about it. So that's why I say I was coerced, because I was the younger one, and I decided, okay, well, let's see what we can do. So as time went on, we decided, well, we need the bishop's approval to do this. So the bishops had given us permission after we circulated a petition throughout the state We didn't just do it in Biddeford Circle. We did it throughout the whole state. We received over 800 signatures that people still remembered Father Zenon. And he had been in, say, Fort Kent. He was probably there in 1817 or something. Right?
1902.
1902?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right, because I'm thinking, yeah, sorry, the people are still remembering him. So we sent the signatures to the bishop, and the bishop gave us permission to go ahead and see what evidence we can scrounge up so that we can then present to him and find out if he will okay it and take on the case. So that's the stage we're at right now. In short, that is how I got drawn into this very interesting scenario.
We're gonna have to move over to the foyer.
Okay, I'll
Can
cut
you-
it short.
One more thing.
Yeah.
Father Zenoir that's buried here,
Yeah.
he died July 26,
Oh, 2 days from today.
2 days from today.
Yeah.
Well,
We admire them.
July, not June.
July, we're in July.
We're in July.
Oh, that's right.
July, he passed away July 26.
it was June. We still have another month.
So listen, we really value the work you've done. It's been amazing and very spiritual, and it's a work of dedication and love.
Thank you so much.
This over here is the arm of Jesus, and this over here is the arm of St. Francis. And this, they call this the flower of the leaf. And this is has to do with education, and it's in Latin, and I have it written downstairs in my paper, but I didn't bring it. But that's the lamp of education. And the Canadian and the fleur de lis pine trees.
And is the
And
spinning
then-
wheel for the mills, the textiles, or?
This is the textile. And this over here, you can't see it because, see, this is supposed to be red, and it's supposed to be represent, you know, the red, white, and blue of the United States. And then I think the one up over there is supposed to represent the color of Canada.
Is this one of the first buildings that was put up for the
It was
college?
right here.
That was here before this building? Or is this?
No, this
This is the
they,
first building.
right in the front over there, there used to be a white wood building where the Franciscans used to live. It was like three sections to it, and then they cut it up and they moved it away. And this building over here, the bases there, before Jeunesse, Lucien Bourque. Lucien Bourque was the one that built this building with Emory Hutchins.
The first building he's talking about, this building over here.
Right, yeah, the first building.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this not this foyer. There was a building which was a high school.
Right, yeah, because that
This
was
is
the
picture
door.
of
was
the
there.
building.
Yeah, the door was right there.
Yeah, right over
This
here.
was added
Right.
on.
And this was added on.
Dennis, it means bright and shining.
Yeah, yeah, bright and shining, yeah. Yeah, the Franciscan did this.
Thank you, Google.
I know, right, what we do.
This is the they used to tie that around their hats and all that. This is over here is the pine tree state, is represent the pine tree states. Those are pine trees. This over here is the fleur de lis and the Canadian. This was and that's the lamp of education.